Let me ask you a seriously tough question. How many times have you spent hundreds of dollars on gas, gear, and bait, woken up before the sun, and spent your entire day casting into water that looks absolutely perfect, only to get completely skunked? You sit there frustrated, blaming the weather, blaming the phase of the moon, or blaming the pressure from other boats. But what if I told you the real problem is staring back at you in the mirror? What if the absolute biggest mistake you are making on the water is that you are fishing where you think the fish should be instead of where they actually are? Today, we are going to talk about an uncomfortable truth that 99% of guys refuse to admit. We are going to break down why your favorite spots are betraying you, why those old school rules are keeping your Livewell empty, and how you can flip the script on your next trip. Stick around, because the reason you are not getting bites might just blow your mind. For decades, we have been taught fishing as if it is a set of rigid rules. Your grandpa probably told you to always throw a spinnerbait past a fallen tree or to always fish the lily pads early in the morning. We are conditioned to look for obvious structure because it is what our human eyes can see and understand. To make things worse, we are creatures of pure habit. You caught a 5-pounder off a specific rocky point 3 years ago, and now your brain has permanently marked that spot as a gold mine. You keep going back trip after trip, season after season, blindly hoping for a repeat. We lock on to these memories and these old beliefs because it is comfortable. It is easy to cast at a dock and tell yourself you are doing the right thing. But the harsh reality is that nature does not care about your memories, and fish do not read the rule books. They are wild animals driven by survival, weather, and food. When you rely solely on what worked yesterday or what looks good on the surface, you are completely ignoring what the ecosystem is doing right now. Let us start with a scenario you know all too well. It is early morning, the mist is just starting to lift off the surface of the lake, and the water is perfectly still. You have your coffee in one hand and you are heading straight to the exact same stump where you caught a monster fish 2 years ago. You pull up, make the perfect cast, let the bait sink, and wait for that familiar thump. Nothing. You cast 10 more times, still absolutely nothing. You scratch your head wondering what went wrong. The stump is still there, the water looks the same. So where is the fish? Here is the cold, hard truth. You are fishing a memory, not the current reality. That fish you caught 2 years ago was not there just because of the stump. It was there because a school of baitfish happened to be pushed against that bank by the wind on that specific day. Today, the wind is entirely different, the baitfish are gone, and that stump is just a dead piece of wood in a lifeless stretch of water. You have to stop casting into ghost towns. This brings us to the biggest illusion in all of fishing, which is the myth of the perfect structure. We have all seen those magazine articles that show a beautiful, submerged laydown tree and tell you it is the ultimate holding spot for big predators. So we spend our entire day bouncing from one fallen tree to the next. But here is what nobody tells you. Structure without a food source is just empty scenery. Fish do not hang out near a log just because it looks cool. They use structure as an ambush point to feed. If there are no minnows, no crawfish, and no bluegill in the area, the predators will simply pack up and leave. You can throw the most expensive, perfectly colored lure in the world at that beautiful tree, but if you are casting into an area completely devoid of life, you are wasting your time. You have to learn to look past the obvious cover and ask yourself a very simple question. Why would a fish actually want to be here right now? Let us talk about the wind, because the way most guys handle the wind is totally backwards. When a stiff breeze picks up and the water starts getting rough, what do 90% of fishermen do? They immediately pack up and run to a quiet, protected cove where the water is calm and it is easier to cast. It feels comfortable for you, but it is a terrible decision for your fishing trip. Wind is your absolute best friend on the water. Wind creates current. It breaks up the surface so fish cannot see you as easily. And most importantly, it pushes microscopic plankton against the windy banks. Where the plankton goes, the baitfish follow. And where the baitfish go, the big predators are waiting. By running away from the wind to fish the calm, quiet water, you are literally driving away from the active feeding zone and settling into a dead area. Stop making things easy on yourself and start putting your boat where the food chain is actively happening. Another massive trap is following the calendar instead of the thermometer. You look at the date, you see it is middle of spring, and you immediately think the fish must be up shallow, spawning. You tie on a shallow crankbait and beat the banks for 5 hours without a single bite. What you completely ignored was the massive cold front that rolled through 2 days ago and dropped the water temperature by 8 degrees. Fish do not own calendars, and they do not care what month it is. They respond entirely to their environment. When that cold front hit, those fish backed off the shallow flats and slid down into the first deep drop-off to find stable water temperatures. But because you were convinced they should be shallow based on the time of year, you fished right over their heads all morning. You have to become obsessed with water temperature and weather trends. If you are not adjusting your depth based on what the weather did over the last 48 hours, you are basically fishing blind. We need to address the dictatorship of the baitfish. I see so many guys obsessing over which specific color of plastic worm to buy, arguing over a slight shade of green versus a slight shade of brown. They think the secret to catching fish is having the exact perfect lure. Listen to me closely. A hungry fish will eat almost anything if you put it in front of them at the right time. Your problem is not that you have the wrong color lure. Your problem is that you are fishing in an area where the fish have no reason to be. The entire predatory ecosystem revolves around finding the next meal. If you want to find the bass, the walleye, or the pike, you have to find their food first. Spend less time throwing your bait blindly at the shoreline and spend more time looking for signs of life. If you do not see baitfish flicking on the surface, or if you do not mark huge balls of bait on your sonar, you need to pull up the trolling motor and move. Have you ever heard of the 90-10 rule? It is a harsh reality that separates the guys who catch limits from the guys who go home angry. The rule states that 90% of the fish in any given body of water are holding in only 10% of the water. Think about that for a second. The vast majority of the lake is essentially a biological desert. Yet I watch guys day after day slowly working their way down a massive, featureless shoreline, making hundreds of casts into dead water, just hoping to cross paths with a random wandering fish. They think that if they just keep casting long enough, eventually they will get a bite. That is not fishing, that is just playing the lottery. You need to stop wasting hours in the 90% zones. Learn to identify the high percentage areas like major creek channel swings, structural intersections, or points with current. Focus all your energy on that golden 10%. Let us talk about seasonal transitions, because this is where a lot of older fishermen completely lose their minds. People treat seasons like a light switch. They think that on the first day of summer, every fish in the lake magically swims out to deep water and stays there until fall. But nature does not work like a light switch, it works like a dial. The transition from spring to summer or summer to fall is a slow, gradual process that takes weeks. The fish are moving along specific migration routes, stopping at secondary points, deep brush piles, and underwater ledges along the way. If you just jump straight from your spring spots to your deep summer spots, you are going to completely miss the fish while they are in transit. You have to become a detective. You have to intercept them on the highway between their seasonal homes. If they are not shallow and they are not completely deep, you better start looking right in the middle. There is a massive misconception about fishing in lakes and ponds, and it has to do with current. Most guys think current only matters if you are fishing in a river. That could not be further from the truth. Even large reservoirs and natural lakes have current, and it dictates exactly where the fish will position themselves. Sometimes it is wind current pushing water around a point. Sometimes it is the local dam generating power and pulling water through the reservoir. Predators absolutely love current because it does the work for them. It tumbles injured baitfish directly to them while they sit comfortably behind a rock or a stump, waiting to ambush. If you pull up to a point and the water is completely stagnant, your chances of catching a fish drop significantly. But if you find a similar point that has a nice, steady flow of water moving across it, you have found the dining room. Pay attention to the water movement, no matter where you are fishing. One of the most overlooked factors that dictates where fish are versus where you think they are is shade and light penetration. We humans love being out in the bright sunshine, so we naturally gravitate towards sunny banks. But you have to remember something very basic. Fish do not have eyelids. When the sun gets high and bright, it is uncomfortable for them, and it makes them highly visible to birds of prey. So what do? They seek out heavy shade. They will tuck themselves far underneath a boat dock, deep into the center of a weed bed, or underneath thick, overhanging trees. They use the dark shadows as camouflage to ambush prey that swims by in the light. If it is high noon on a sunny day and you are casting a topwater lure out into the bright, open water, you are completely out of touch with the reality of the fish. You have to put your bait in the dark, hard-to-reach places where they are actually hiding. Here is a painful truth about fish behavior that ruins a lot of perfectly good fishing trips. You can find exactly where the fish are, you can see them perfectly on your depth finder, but you still cannot catch them. Why? Because you are ignoring the mood of the fish. You assume that just because they are there, they must be willing to aggressively chase down a fast-moving crankbait. But fish have moods. Sometimes they are actively feeding, sometimes they are completely neutral, and sometimes they are negatively affected by a weather front and will not move an inch to eat. If you find fish and they are glued flat to the bottom and not moving, they are in a negative mood. You cannot force them to chase a fast lure. You have to slow down, drop something right on their nose, and agitate them into a reaction strike. Understanding where they are is only half the battle. You have to adjust your presentation to match their current attitude. Information overload is a real disease in the modern fishing world. You watch a guy on YouTube having the best day of his life throwing a hollow body frog over thick lily pads. So the next morning, you go to your local lake, tie on a frog, and spend 6 hours violently twitching it over the pads, but you do not get a single bite. What you failed to realize is that the guy on the internet was fishing a completely different body of water, in a different state, with different water temperatures and different forage. Your local lily pads might be dying off, sucking oxygen out of the water and driving all the fish away. But because the internet told you it was a good idea, you forced the issue all day long. Local conditions will beat internet advice every single day of the week. You have to stop trying to force a pre-planned technique onto a lake that is telling you to do something entirely different. Let us talk about pacing and why your stubbornness is costing you fish. I see guys pull up to a shoreline and start casting a spinnerbait. They fish for 3 straight hours down an endless bank without a single bite. But instead of realizing they are doing something wrong, they just keep casting the exact same lure at the exact same speed for another 3 hours. This is the definition of insanity. If you have been doing the same thing for an hour and the fish have not responded, they are screaming at you that you are wrong. You have to swallow your pride and change your pace. If fast-moving baits are not working, pick up a slow-moving plastic worm. If the shallow bank is dead, turn the boat around and head out to deep water. The most successful fishermen in the world are the ones who realize they are wrong quickly and pivot their strategy immediately. Change is absolutely mandatory if you want to be successful. One of the saddest things about modern fishing is that guys spend the entire day staring down at their screens or staring at their reels, and they completely forget to look around. Nature is constantly giving you clues about where the fish are. If you see a flock of seagulls or herons diving into the water in the middle of a shallow flat, they are not doing it for fun. They are attacking a massive school of baitfish, and I can guarantee you that underneath that baitfish school, the big predator fish are attacking from the bottom. If you see dragonflies buzzing around a specific patch of reeds, or turtles sunning themselves on a specific log, it means that area is full of life, and the water temperature is favorable, you have to pull your head up, look at the birds, watch the bugs and read the signs that nature is giving you. The fish are where the life is, you just have to open your eyes and find it. Let us destroy the myth of the secret magic lure once and for all. Walk into any tackle shop and you will see guys spending massive amounts of money trying to find the one secret bait that will magically make fish bite. They think the reason they are not catching fish is because their crankbait has a chartreuse belly instead of an orange belly. That is completely absurd. The vast majority of the time, you are not failing because of your lure selection. You are failing because you are throwing your lure into empty water. Location will beat presentation every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. If you find a massive school of actively feeding fish, you could throw a bare hook with a piece of chewing gum on it, and they would probably bite it. Stop worrying so much about the exact shade of your bait and start putting that mental energy into finding the correct location. Find the fish first, worry about the lure second. We need to address the very real phobia that most weekend anglers have, which is the fear of deep water. So many guys are bank beaters. They put the boat in the water, immediately head to the shoreline, and they never leave it. They only fish the bank because it is what they can see with their own eyes. It is a visual comfort zone. But during the heat of the summer or the dead of winter, the shallow bank is the worst place you can possibly be. The giant schools of fish have moved completely offshore. They are sitting on deep river ledges, sunken roadbeds, and deep brush piles 20 or 30 feet down. If you refuse to leave the shoreline because it makes you nervous, you are voluntarily cutting yourself off from the biggest populations of fish in the lake. You have to conquer your fear of the deep water, learn how to read a topographic map, learn how to find offshore structure, and step out of your visual comfort zone. Fishing pressure is a factor that most guys complain about, but very few guys actually adapt to. Picture this. It is Saturday morning, the weather is beautiful, and there are 50 boats on the lake. You pull up to the most famous community hole on the lake, a great-looking rock pile, but 3 other boats have already been there and pounded it with heavy lures. You fish it anyway, catch nothing, and complain that the lake is fished out. The fish did not evaporate. They are just highly stressed from the engine noise and the constant bombardment of lures. When fishing pressure is high, the fish will slide off the obvious spots and tuck into thicker cover, or move out to secondary break lines just out of sight. You have to anticipate the pressure. Leave the obvious, famous spots to the amateurs and start looking for the subtle, hidden spots nearby where the fish go to hide when the chaos starts. Adjust to the crowd. Do not just join it. Water clarity is an absolute game changer, yet so many fishermen completely ignore it when picking their spots. Let us say you had a great day fishing a clear water point last week, but it rained heavily for the last 2 days, and now that entire side of the lake looks like thick chocolate milk. You pull up and try to fish your finesse baits just like you did last week. It is never going to work. Fish rely heavily on sight in clear water, but in muddy water they are practically blind. They have to rely entirely on their lateral lines to feel the vibration of the bait. If you do not change your location to find cleaner water, or drastically change your bait to something that rattles and thumps aggressively, the fish will literally never know your lure is there. You cannot fish muddy water with clear water tactics, and you cannot fish clear water with muddy water tactics. You must adapt to the visibility of your environment. Let us talk about the golden hour trap. Every fisherman knows that the first hour of daylight and the last hour of daylight are magical. The fish are usually aggressive and feeding near the surface. But what happens at 10 o'clock in the morning when the sun gets high? Most guys get discouraged, decide the bite is over, and go home to cut the grass. They assume that if the fish are not biting where they were at dawn, they must have stopped eating altogether. That is a massive failure in logic. The fish did not stop eating, they just moved. As the sun rises and the day heats up, they might slide out deeper, tuck under heavy shade, or wait for the wind to pick up to trigger another feeding window. I have had days where the absolute best bite happened at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because a slight warming trend activated the baitfish. Do not pack up and quit just because the easy morning bite is over. Keep hunting. We need to have a serious talk about how you are using your expensive boat electronics. Guys will spend thousands of dollars on the newest sonar screens and then use them in the worst way possible. They drive around aimlessly staring at the screen, looking purely for fish arches. If they do not see a fish icon, they do not stop. This is a massive mistake. Your electronics are not just for spotting fish, they are for reading the entire environment. You need to be looking at the hardness of the bottom. Is it soft mud or hard rock? You need to look for the thermocline, which is the layer of water where the temperature changes rapidly and traps the baitfish. You need to look for submerged grass lines that you cannot see from the surface. If you use your screen to find the right habitat, the right bottom composition, and the right baitfish, the predator fish will naturally be there, even if they are tucked too tight to the bottom to show up as a perfect arch. Ultimately, breaking this terrible habit requires a complete shift in your mindset. You have to leave your ego at the boat ramp. Every single time you launch your boat, you need to treat the lake like a blank slate. Forget what happened last week, forget what happened last year. Take 5 minutes to just sit there and absorb the current conditions. Which way is the wind blowing right now? What is the exact water temperature today? Has the water level risen or dropped since last night? You are not just out there casting, you are a detective trying to solve a real-time puzzle. The guys who consistently catch giant bags of fish are not lucky, and they do not have magical lures. They are simply the guys who are willing to admit that the fish dictate the rules, not the fishermen. When you stop telling the fish where they should be and start listening to where they actually are, your entire fishing career will change forever. So let us bring it all together. The hardest lesson for any angler to swallow is that we are often our own worst enemies on the water. We fish our precious memories, we stare blindly at textbook structure, and we stubbornly refuse to adapt to the reality of the day. But the moment you accept that nature is constantly changing, everything gets better. The biggest turning point you can make is simply leaving your ego at the dock. Start chasing the baitfish. Start using the wind to your advantage. Respect the current and stop wasting your time in dead, empty water just because it feels comfortable. When you finally stop fishing where you think the fish should be and start fishing the actual conditions in front of you, you will experience the kind of success you previously only dreamed about. Thank you guys so much for watching. If this video opened your eyes or helped you out, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on the video, it really helps the channel grow. Now head down to the comments and let us talk. What is the single hardest habit for you to break when you get out on the water? Let me know and I will see you on the next one.